Oda just revealed a huge secret about a member of the D clan in this week's chapter, but it's not who you were expecting. You see, after the ending of the last chapter, the consensus amongst the fandom was that this chapter would definitely have a flashback in it, giving us a look into one of the last interactions Emmett had with Joy Boy before his passing. And well, we were half right. We did end up getting a flashback to open up this chapter, so we can check that off our list, but the flashback we got was centered around seemingly the last meeting between Dr. Vegapunk and Professor Clover, where we find out that Clover had an older brother who had been executed right in front of him by the world government simply for having the initial D, meaning that Professor Clover himself this entire time has also been a member of the D clan, with his real name being, and I'm probably going to butcher this, Cleom D. Clover. That was not the big reveal I thought we'd be getting this week, especially since the only person who could be possibly having this flashback is the real Dr. Vegapunk, and well, he's kind of dead. Or, seemingly he's dead, but I guess technically, as long as his brain is active in Punk Records, he can't really die, which I guess means there's two options for how we're seeing this memory. Either his actual brain is having this flashback, which I think is highly unlikely since we don't see it at all in this chapter, or we're watching a flashback of the Vegapunk from the recording, which I guess means we're kind of watching a flashback in a sense in another flashback. Honestly, it's not really all that important how we're seeing this memory, but I did think it was something interesting to think about. So let me know in the comments down below, how do you think we're seeing this flashback? What's also interesting is that we find out Clover actually invited Vegapunk to join him in researching the Void Century, but Vegapunk ended up turning him down. I've seen a lot of shade being thrown at Dr. Vegapunk for this, saying that him turning down working with Clover, especially after revealing why he chose to study the Ancient Kingdom, was extremely heartless. But I'm honestly not sure if I see it that way. Heartless would have been Vegapunk just telling Clover to F off, maybe even reporting him to the world government for revealing that he is also a D, but instead, Vegapunk tried his best to warn Clover to persuade his friend from throwing away his life by pursuing this forbidden knowledge, even going so far as to tell him that the government has only let him live this long so they can catch him and his co-conspirators all at once, which we unfortunately saw was true when they performed a buster call on O'Hara. It's not that Vegapunk was being heartless, it's just at the time, he couldn't understand why his friend would be willing to knowingly throw away his life in pursuit of discovering the world's hidden past. But as we know, he eventually did come to realize why this research and spreading this knowledge to the whole world was so important. I don't know if we'll ever get an official confirmation of when Vegapunk began studying the Void Century, but after this flashback, I'd like to believe that it was immediately after Clover's death, realizing his mistake in not helping his friend when he was still alive, and choosing to honor his memory and inherit his will by continuing his mission. And although he didn't plan to, with this message now sparking the world's interest in the Void Century, he has left the door open for Robin to finish both his and Clover's work by revealing the rest. A lot of the complaints I've seen when it came to this broadcast was that it takes away Robin's purpose on the crew, but in reality, this elevates her. Because if we're being honest, no one would have believed her if she just began announcing to the world the truth about the Void Century after the crew discovers it. But now that Vegapunk set the groundwork, the world now knows what really happened to O'Hara, and that she was the lone survivor, her words are going to hold a lot more weight. And speaking of weight, no one had more on their back in this chapter than Atlas, as she made the heroic decision to fake Lil Steph and single-handedly hold off Venus to allow the Straw Hats to escape. This was heavy. Like, it was clear out of the two remaining good Vegapunks, only one was likely making off the island, and after the last chapter, we knew it wasn't going to be Atlas, but even a week-long break couldn't prepare me for how incredibly sad this entire interaction would end up being, and I wasn't even a huge Atlas fan. Like, I've been consistent this entire arc that Lilith was the only Vegapunk I cared about actually surviving all of this. The rest were honestly whatever to me. But now, after seeing her jump headfirst into certain death, lose an arm, get sliced to pieces, and have her last act be blowing herself up to give the Sunny the extra boost it needed to land safely, all to make sure her sister could get away, I can definitely say I am the sad. But at the same time, I am glad that her final act got to be her living up to her nature and performing an act of violence so grand that it took one of the other stars out of commission. Well, I say out of commission, but obviously he's going to heal from this. I just think that this was Oda's way of essentially writing him out of this conflict. So now the only ones we have left to deal with are Saturn, Jupiter, and Mars. And I honestly cannot believe I'm saying this again 2 chapters in a row, but Jupiter is somehow walking away with the MVP from this chapter amongst the 5 elders, as he's the only one who actually managed to do something, biting off a large part of Emmett's body. And no, before you say it, Venus cutting off Alice's arm does not count because she was in complete control that entire fight, and he didn't manage to take her out, she took herself out. So really, as of right now, the one we all thought would end up being the weakest out of the Gorosei is actually carrying the team more than Goku did during the Saiyan Saga. But that's not to say the others aren't at least trying. Mars does get back up in the chapter and is ready to tag team Emmett with Jupiter, and Saturn managed to make his way aboard the giant ship and is going to attempt to take out both Bonnie and Kuma. Keyword there being attempt. Because with who knows how many giants, Frankie, Sanji, and a still Gear 5 Luffy, he's not getting anywhere near Bonnie. At most, Saturn will manage to get to Kuma, and this will finally be the sad farewell we've all been expecting to happen since Kuma first landed on Egghead, as he also sacrifices himself to ensure his daughter's safety. And actually, now that I think about it, this entire arc has mostly been the robots who have been taking the heavy losses. Like, Lilith and York were the only two completely human looking satellites, and now they're the only ones who survived. We all expect Kuma to go out sacrificing himself for Bonnie in the next upcoming chapters, and now even Emmett is seemingly going to go down protecting Luffy from the Gorosei. Main Dr. Vegapunk might be the only human casualty we have this entire arc, and that's assuming he's actually dead. Unless, of course, whatever Kuma or Emmett ends up doing permanently takes out one of the elders, but that's very unlikely. Anyway, enough of the doom and gloom and death. I want to talk about how fun that entire interaction between Luffy and Emmett was. We get Luffy being excited about a giant taco robot just showing up out of completely nowhere, because apparently Luffy did not see it just rampaging throughout the island trying to make it to him. And Emmett is extremely excited about finally getting to see Joy Boy again, even though Luffy still has no idea who that even is. Although, to be fair, this entire arc, everyone's been calling him Nika, not Joy Boy, so I guess he wouldn't know. But then again, he did hear that name from Kaido directly, though you could say that he probably wasn't paying attention in the heat of the moment. But Luffy not knowing who Joy Boy is doesn't matter to Emmett, because to him, all that matters is that he gets to fight for Joy Boy one more time. Although things don't exactly go smoothly for him. You know, with all the centuries of rust and wear having done a real number on him and his weapons, that entire sequence of him getting ready to fire off some kind of rocket punch at Jupiter while Luffy, Frankie, and Sanji all get hyped up watching him, only for it to end in a puff due to his weapons eroding over the time he was inactive, disappointing the boys. It was hilarious. Exactly what I needed after such a depressing first half of the chapter. And I'm really hoping we get to see a few more of these types of interactions between the four of them before the arc is officially over. Now, even though his usual weapons are offline, Emmett does still have one more trick up his sleeve, something that Joy Boy told him only to use when the time is right, and now is that time. My guess is going to be something related to one of the ancient weapons, but to find out what it really is, we'll have to wait until the next chapter. So let me know in the comments down below, what do you think the secret weapon that Joy Boy left with Emmett will end up being?